Okay guys, welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking to Pete of LS Droid. Now in this interview we're going to talk about both LS Droid and OBDX and some of its Holly products, but down in the description you're going to find a link to where you can purchase the OBDX tools. Now he didn't sponsor me to put that down there, but I thought it would be good to include in this video, so definitely check out that link. Now let's get into this interview. Pete, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name's Pete Sonntag, and I'm probably best known for the creation of LS Droid, but there's a lot of other projects that I've been involved with over the last number of years that people have also come to know me through.
I'll introduce myself. My name's Matthew Garner, and I run Fixed Until Broken. I'm sure most of the people viewing this video are going to know you before they know me, but I specialize in repairing GM instrument clusters on the channel, but in real life, I am a technician at a company that makes DC to DC and AC to DC converters.
Okay.
So let's start out with talking about LS Droid a little bit, since you brought that up. So what kind of gave you the idea to start working on LS Droid?
That's actually kind of funny. LS Droid started because of the result of a failed flash from an EFI Live flash scan device, where they wouldn't credit me for the $125 for the PCM that I not only bricked, but then lost the license on.
Okay, so I'm sure they're regretting not giving you that back.
I'm fairly certain that there's some regret at this point.
Because $125 versus now people can. I'm sure you don't condone it, but I mean you can clone an already done tune that's been done with EFI Live or HP tuners.
Yeah, I mean you can go in and change the licensing parts in the PCM that they use to determine if you've licensed it or not. Like I said, I don't condone it, but the fact that it is possible, people can use their imaginations of the reasons why you'd need to use that.
Yeah, exactly.
A legitimate reason would be you want to make a backup of your PCM, so if anything happens to it, that the PCM breaks for whatever reason or just fails, that you've got a backup of it.
Yep. So yeah, and that's the main thing is it's like just because a tool can be misused doesn't mean the tool is malicious. But yeah, a lot of people don't understand that, I think.
Yeah, I get people asking about that a lot, and I'm like, that's not what it was created for. You can read between the lines here, I guess, if you will. Do with it what you want. I make it very clear that I have no control over how it's being used. I don't condone its use for that, but if the end user wants to do it for that and they're fine with it, at the end of the day, it's up to them, and each person has to make their own decision about that. But yes, there are a number of ways the tool can be misused, but it's not the only tool that's capable of doing it anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, because I mean, an alternative would be PCM Hammer, which is what we based IPC Hammer off of.
Yep. If you ever go into the credits, I'm actually in PCM Hammer. I was developed a lot of that with them at the same time. LS Droid was originally in parallel with it, and then at one point during the project, we kind of split and went different directions with our work.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's actually where I kind of found out about LS Droid through was looking through the credits and Googling some of the usernames, because I was trying to learn how to do some of the stuff that was in there. And that's how I found LS Droid. Yeah, I found LS Droid through finding you online through the credits. So that was my fork into finding it.
Yeah, I used to take and keep a lot higher profile for LS Droid and like the LS1 Tech and stuff like that. And it honestly got to the point to where it was more time trying to update posts and answer questions one-on-one than what it was beginning to be worth once I started getting thousands of users for it.
Yes, and I'm sure you get this, which I get a lot with doing I put out the information on how to do these clusters and stuff. A lot of the stuff that I know how to do, other people know how to do it, but they just weren't putting the information out there. So I get a lot of complaints saying, oh, I'm killing the community by putting this information out because all these other people can do it now. Have you ever had any tuners say that about your software?
I have, and after I've talked with them and explained to them the reasons why I'm doing it and why I didn't feel like I was hurting them, I actually have a number of them are administrators in my LS Droid Facebook group now.
That's good. Yeah. If I had the time, I would engage with them and like explain why they're wrong, because I mean, their knowledge is power, and it's not killing a community.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in my case, I was talking to some guys that are pretty well known outside of like your Facebook communities, but in the tuning world by their usernames or what they actually do, they're pretty well known. So getting them on my side was, I mean, they tested the software for me early on, and these guys do, a couple of dozen PCMs a day. So they were able to get me a lot better idea of if there were problems with things.
Mhm.
They were the first ones to find it. And if something did happen, they had the tools to fix it. So it wasn't like some users now out of PCM where it's broken. And once I explained to them why I was doing it, the people that LS Droid was targeting are not the same people that are paying for mail order tunes and things like that. The
Mhm.
people that are buying your eBay tunes are the people that LS Droid is focusing on. And we'll say 9 out of 10 times those eBay tunes aren't worth the money that you're paid for them, not even close.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Is
Mm.
like the same kind of person that's going to watch one of my videos and recreate it, fixing their cluster, is the same kind of person that never would have paid anybody in the first place. They'd have gone to eBay
Exactly.
instead, and that's what I try to explain to people. But I just don't have the time to really sit down and talk to them and go like, look, I'm not affecting your bottom line. And so, but let's transition into the tool that you've made. So you have, well, I mean, you have a ton of tools that you made, but
The OBDX Pros.
yes, the OBDX Pro.
Yep.
Sorry, I was having a brain fart there. I'm looking at my OBD link right here, and it's like I'm wanting to say OBD link, but I know it's not. It's the OBDX Pro. What got you to make that? And I'm assuming it's these things being garbage was.
It's actually there's actually two parts to that, and they kind of go hand in hand. When the project initially started with LS Droid and PCM Hammer, there was a tool that was from a company that, well, it was like an individual. The company was called All Pro. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them or not.
I have heard of All Pro.
Okay, it was the original All Pro devices. Their USB version was working for PCM Hammer. Their Bluetooth version was not capable of reading the large blocks or dealing with 4X with the custom firmware that had been developed for it, which at that point leaves me kind of in an awkward place, but I was still working on a solution for it at that point. And then people started having problems with the All Pros failing when this guy was originally making, maybe one or two a week or every couple of weeks, and all of a sudden he's going to 10 or 15 a day.
Mhm.
And he was hand building these things, and he was hand building them for basically what it cost him in materials to build it, with nothing accounting for his time.
Yeah.
And when you're doing it as a hobby, that's fine if that's what you enjoy doing,
Mhm.
because it's one or two, and you take a week to build or whatever. All of a sudden you're selling 20 or 30 a week. That's not a hobby anymore. That becomes a full-time job. And
Yes.
there was no money in it for him.
Yeah. You need
And oh, go ahead.
getting to those kind of numbers. You need like a pick and place machine.
Oh, that was exactly it. And I'm assuming from having talked to him that he was still hand soldering these by hand. He may have been using soldering paste with a template for it, but it was
Mhm.
still one by one. And he wasn't. He was barely breaking even on the parts. And then the All Pros started failing.
Mhm.
And when you buy something that has no profit to begin with, you can forget about a warranty of any kind. Who's going to eat the parts at that point?
Yeah.
He's not making money, and if he is, he's making maybe $2 or $3 at most. There's no warranty there, and the tool was failing. There were a lot of reasons why it was failing. At the end of the day, it was a design that wasn't really designed for what it was being used for, but it was using custom firmware that some of the people involved in PCM Hammer had rewritten to make it do what they needed. So that was it took something that was, it could have been workable, and it ended up killing it just because of the amount of users that wanted to use it.
Yeah.
And it left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth, which was bad. I personally, I probably had two or three of every model they sold, and a couple of them never went anywhere, and I just had them, never used them, but whatever. And then it was the people who are buying them that were actually trying to save money because they were doing this on a budget. Those were the people who we started getting lashback from. They were unhappy that they'd wasted. They were $33, $35 plus shipping.
Okay.
And it's like, you bought a tool that was, you're talking Amazon Chinese prices, and you bought something that was amazing, you used for 6 months, and then it failed. That You got your money's worth out of it, dude. I don't want to tell you here. That was the first part. When the All Pro started failing, I went to OBD Link, and I'm not sure who I started talking to, but I worked my way up the ladder there, and a number of other people who were involved with PCM Hammer had also talked to OBD Link at different times throughout the years about adding support for 4X mode.
Yeah.
It's not required, but it is significantly faster,
Mhm.
and also increasing the size of their buffer.
Yeah.
So after I talked to them, come to find out they actually had a larger buffer all along using their proprietary commands that are basically unpublished.
Mhm.
So I get the information from them on the commands, which opened up the doorway for using the OBD links for flashing with LS Droid and PCM Hammer. Then to address the 4X issue, I'm like, hey, a couple of programs using this, we could really use it. It's not going to take a lot. We've already written firmware for another tool. We can give you that. You guys can work from it. And they're like, okay, I talked to them back and forth for probably 7 or 8 months, and they were all on board. They were going to go for it. They got, it's corporate BS basically. They've got to go through the right channels and get the engineers involved, and it was believable. And one day I get an email from who turned out, I guess it was the CEO of the company, who jumps in on the email and says, nope, that's it. We're done. We're not going to do it. And I'm like, 8 months you've been telling me, I've been telling the community. And they ended the conversation with, if you think you can build a better tool, go build it yourself.
And so you did.
Basically the same words that I got from EFI Live. If you think you can write better flashing software, go write it yourself. And
yeah.
that's a 1 in a million shot. You're going to tell somebody, if you think you can do it, go do it. I'm the person you don't challenge that with. You tell me if you can't do it, I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with the OBDX Pro. I had I had the 1X part of it sorted out for the hardware, and I almost had the 4X part of it working. And I was originally using the Adreno mega chips. I mean, we're talking, you're dealing with microsecond timing, so 1/1000th of a millisecond.
Yeah.
The timing is super critical, and I got it really close, but it was still nowhere near close enough for a PCM. I'd approached a couple of people that were involved with the PCM Hammer project. I was like, hey, here's what I've got. Can we do something with this? Let's come up with a new tool.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew who I was, or gave me much thought at the time. And to be honest, I mean, I hadn't been involved in the PC, the PC programming side of this for very long. I'd been doing some other things when I was younger, but I was like, this is what I'm doing now, and nobody thought anything of it. And then I approached the guy. He owns a business in Australia, MBS Customs. He goes by the name of Jason or Taz.
Yep.
I'd approached him, and I showed him what I had, and I said, hey, can we do something with this? And he said, yeah, I think we can. And we spent a couple of nights working over TeamViewer, and took what I had. He made a few changes to it for parts of it that I didn't really understand, that was dealing with the raw timing of the processor. And we had he added a command set that he'd already written for some of the own stuff that he worked on. And like 3 nights later, I'm out in my Tahoe and I'm reading the PCM off of an Adreno board with a breadboard with a whole built circuit on it in 4X mode.
I've seen your Arduino code. It's still in the PCM Hammer GitHub. It's still in there. So I've glanced at it. A lot of it I don't understand looking at it, because
the code that's in there it's probably the simplest circuit you can ever imagine for working with it. It is basically it's bare minimum everything, but it is fully functional for 1X.
Nice.
And even though this is a project that's closed source, I still left the code there because I'd already put it out there. I'd shared it with people. So, I'm not going to take that back. It's not going to, it's never impacted the tool.
Yeah.
And it's using a processor that the average person can get their hands on, which is the reason why we used it initially. Is we were using, most people start out with something that they can work with, that's easy to take and work with. And the Adreno boards are easy. The processors we use now are ARM processors, and there is nothing easy about working with them, just to be honest. I mean, they are very complicated. They are frustrating, and they can be time consuming from a hardware and a software standpoint. The Adreno boards, though, I mean, anybody can use it. It's the type of thing, either you're going to understand it or you're not.
Yeah.
If you don't understand it, it's not in my repository. It's not even on my GitHub, so I don't care. There's nothing linking me directly to it. I'm not going to answer questions about it. If you got a question about it, figure it out yourself, or go ask an Adreno community or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it works, and it does what people need for basic stuff, and that's where it started. And it took us probably maybe 2 or 3 years before we released our first tool. And there was a lot of learning involved, both for myself and for Jason, who owns MBS Customs, who was helping me with it. He has dramatically increased his programming skills over the year. I can tell you that just from having seen the code. Things that he wrote 3 years ago, he looks at now that I may still be using for some of my own work, and he's like, who wrote this? And I'm like, dude, you wrote that. And he just laughs about it. But at the same time, I go back and I look at my initial hardware that I built for the OBDX Pro tools, and I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I doing here? But it's one of those things, it's not the type of thing people normally do, but after doing it for a lot of times over a number of years, you get good at it. And when we finally felt we had a solid design, we brought it to market, and we've continued to improve on that design.
So that sounds like that answers one of my questions that I was going to ask is kind of like behind the scenes, who does the hardware and who does the software? So
I I do the hard well, the hardware is kind of a hard part. I do all the hardware designs
okay.
and all the circuit designs. I've come up with most of those based on personal experience with testing on things. When it comes to prototyping, if there's a problem with the circuits, because of the size of the parts we're into, uh, I'll be 41 this year, and I was a mechanic for a really long time, and I've got carpal tunnel and arthritis in both hands. My hands are nowhere near what they used to be, so I can't work with really small parts.
Okay.
So if we build a prototype and there's a problem with it, there's not a very or not a very good probability that I can fix the board myself to try and salvage it. That's
Okay.
where my partner Jason comes in. He's a lot younger than I am, and he hasn't subjected himself to years of abuse. So he can go in. I mean, he's good enough. He can solder wires directly onto the legs of a processor that's using, like a 0.5 millimeter spacing.
Yeah.
So he has no problem with that. So I've got to tell him what terminals to solder onto, but he can get the wires soldered on, and we can go through and troubleshoot boards like that. So he does help with the hardware in that aspect. But as far as the hardware designs go, I came up with all those. He does the actual programming,
Okay.
although that's not to say that I can't. One of my own projects I was working on last fall, I needed to use a new processor because the current chips we've been using, they've gone up. I mean, they've gone up astronomically. They were up at one point earlier this year, I think $27 for just the processor. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So I was looking for a cheaper chip for some of my own hardware. I found one. I'm like, well, I need to write the code for it to make sure it works. I'm just going to use our current firmware from the scan tool, and I'll port that since it's got an easy to use interface and I know it works to begin with. When I get that working, then hey, we're good to go. I can work on my own stuff. And I ended up turning it into a new scan tool. We haven't released it yet because we needed software that supported it, and the current versions of LS Droid were not designed to support this particular tool. It's going to be called the OBDX Pro VC. The VC, there's a couple of different things you could say it means. That the end result was it's very cheap. The tool was built to be inexpensive. It's going to be probably about half the price of our current tool. We've left the wireless protocols off it, but it puts us way below anything else that's even comparable. Speed wise, it's within 1 or 2 seconds of our current tool over USB. I mean, it's a VPW tool. That's all it works on, but it was designed to be cheap, and that's exactly what it did. And the software for that I actually did myself. I did probably 99% of it myself. When I was done doing what I did, I gave it back to Jason. I said, here's what I've got. There's a few things here that I know need to be fixed up. Can you finish this out, round it out? He cleaned up the code, fixed a few of the mistakes I had, and then he ended up writing a bootloader for it, so that we can do firmware updates remotely and things like that, and would not risk damaging, bricking the tool or anything like that. And I mean, yeah, it works out. I just like he's done some of the hardware designs before, and he's come up, done some prototyping. We kind of go back and forth, but I primarily do hardware. He primarily does software, and it's worked out really well that way.
Okay, so we have the VT, the VC. When are we going to get the CB for CAN bus?
It's actually we have two. We have the GT, and then we have the VX. The GT, it stands for GM tool. That supports ALDL, J1850 VPW, and then high-speed CAN bus, and then the one-wire CAN bus.
Okay.
So it supports every protocol GM's ever made. ALDL doesn't sound like a big deal. We quit using it back in '95. The Holden cars in Australia used it until 08 or 09, something like that. So they use it for a lot longer than we did. And it's still very popular over there. So we'll have all the protocols for that on the GT. The GT is going to be our flagship tool for GM vehicles. This is, can you see this?
Yes.
That's actually the GT. That's every GM protocol that was ever made is on that tool there. So we'll be coming out with that. Again, we haven't worked real hard on the firmware getting that finished up because we need a program to work with it. LS Droid isn't to the point where it's ready to do CAN bus PCMs yet. I needed to rewrite the program to get it to that point. The tool needs software to work with, though, and LS Droid's not designed to work with a tool that it doesn't know the name for, so it wouldn't have accepted it in the first place. So I gotta release the new version of LS Droid to even support it for the current J1850 protocol before we can think about even adding CAN bus. So those tools been waiting. The GT's been ready for probably 2 or 3 months now, and the VC's been ready since I want to say around October or November of last year. But it was getting the software so that it works with our current protocols finished because I've completely rewritten LS Droid. So the
So
GT will be out there.
go
Then
ahead.
we have the VX, which is the VT and the GT are like our top end tools. The VT is wireless. Well, we have Bluetooth, Bluetooth low energy, we have Wi-Fi and USB for conductivity on. The VC is strictly USB. We cut a lot of the cost by dropping the wireless protocols. The VX is going to be the equivalent of a CAN bus tool. We're going to take and drop the wireless protocols. We might drop the one wire CAN protocol that GM used, just because it's not real popular outside of like your instrument clusters and stuff.
I was going to say the instrument clusters use it though.
They do, but for your average user, for using Torque or even for LS Droid, it's not going to make use of it.
Mhm.
And adding that one wire protocol adds probably 10 or 15% more to the cost of the tool.
Okay.
And so we're looking at what protocols can we support for a tool that's going to be usable. We don't want to put protocols on that people don't need because they're just adding to the cost. So we'll strip the wireless protocols off. That knocks a good chunk off it right there. If we leave the one wire CAN off, it'll still work for probably 95% of what people need to do. We haven't talked about pricing that because we haven't got the hardware design for that finalized yet. The GT, on the other hand, is going to be our flagship tool that does everything with wireless, Bluetooth low energy, and Wi-Fi. So that's going to be we'd like it to be our go-to tool, but that's also going to be one of our more expensive tools. I mean, that's got everything. We've kept it in a small package. I think we got them set to retail at like $129.99, I want to say is where we're going to be at, which comparatively is still the cheapest tool on the planet that does what it does.
Yep, I'd agree there.
And we recently, it was Jason added it. He recently has just finished adding the support for J2534 protocol so that it works with GM flashing services. So you'll be able to flash an instrument cluster with the GM Tech Connect using an OBDX Pro GT, for example.
So we were talking about new versions of LS Droid. Rumor on the street is LS Droid for Android's dead because there's problems with the new versions of Android. Is that true?
No. Well,
no.
There's some truth to that, but not in the context that's been portrayed. The current alliteration of LS Droid is dead, not because of Android's restrictions. I guess you would call it the API that I used to build, the program that I used to build it in, was never designed for what I built with it. It was designed for building like just basically mini games or people that just wanted to get a feel for it. It's called App Inventor 2, and it's block-based programming. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or heard of it.
A little bit, yes.
It literally looks like Legos.
Yes, yeah.
That's what LS Droid Legacy was built with. And that has gone well beyond what that program was ever designed for. And that's where the trouble comes in, is that there's a lot of things that I've had to have custom extensions made for it to do the things that it does, like converting a binary file into an ASCII string file that the app can work with. That was not something that App Inventor was ever designed to handle. So I've had to create a custom extension. And there's a lot of those extensions that I've had to have made over the years that have, every time Android makes a big change, has broken the extension and then has to be rewritten again. And the most noticeable changes I made recently was the changes to file storage, that you could no longer access files outside of the app specific folder. And the block builder didn't do a good job of accessing the web, as we saw through LS Droid 2.2b that was plagued with online web issues for years.
Yes.
That version of LS Droid, I drew the line at Legacy. It was called Legacy for a reason. That was the end of the era for it. This was, we're done with it at this point. We're not done with the idea. We're done with this current version. It needs to be rewritten either in Visual Studio using one of the Android frameworks for it, or needs to be rewritten in Android Studio, because it does too much at this point to make it work with something less than a full programming IDE.
Okay.
And that's where LS Droid for Windows kind of came in.
Hmm.
In order to get it back to Android in an Android program environment, it needs to be built in a Windows environment first. And LS Droid for Windows was my first take at programming a GUI-based application in a real IDE through Windows.
Okay, so now that we've segued into the Android for Windows, let's address the elephant in the room with that. Why does it show up as a Trojan when you install it?
I was initially going to release the source code and open source the project. And when I think I might have even started the original alpha testing for it. A couple of people approached me initially and they asked me for copies of the source code before it was going to be released. When
Mhm.
I asked them why they were interested in the source code, they wanted to make changes for their own personal use. So I do my due diligence and I look into who these people are. And these are people who are taking projects from GitHub, they're reskinning a UI, and they're then selling it either in their own web store or they're putting it on eBay.
Mhm.
And the more I looked into it, the more it became apparent. And then I'm like, I still hadn't decided what I was going to do. My administrators or moderators in my LS Droid group started messaging me, hey, so and so's messaged me asking me for a copy of your LS Droid source code.
Yeah.
And they're like, you said that you didn't want us to share this. So all my administrators had actual raw copies of the app, and like, you said not to share it, we didn't, but we wanted to let you know this guy was looking for it. And it was the same names kept coming up, and it's like these people were up to no good. And then Jason actually looked into it, and he found out one of the guys literally was up to no good. Like, this is the kind of person that's going to take and reskin it and sell it as a for-profit product. I'm like, I'm not going to share it. And to make sure that it didn't go anywhere, I was sent an encryption program called Orleans. It's basically military grade encryption that encrypts the program, which is fine. And it's encrypted with a really secure program.
Mhm.
I did not have a what I'm not sure what the actual term for it. It's the I didn't have the license to sign the file as a registered
Mhm.
developer because
Yes.
those aren't free.
Yes.
And it came down to signing the program would have it would have probably made it to where it didn't get flagged as a virus.
Mhm.
Initially, when I didn't sign the program and initially didn't get flagged, Windows Defender would come up and ask you, hey, do you want to run this program? It's from an unknown publisher.
Yes.
Your antivirus would say, we can't determine what this program is. Do you trust it?
Mhm.
That goes two ways. If people say yes, it gets a green flag. That gets green flagged enough, it starts getting let past. The first thing most people do when they see a pop-up like that is they click no and they close it out. They
Yes.
instantly take that to mean the program's dangerous, it's bad news, don't run it. And you can imagine how it spirals out of control from there. The more people that get freaked out by it and click no, the more times it's being flagged for malicious software as a virus.
Mhm.
If you upload a copy of it to if you just give them the URL off my website from lsdroid.com, send that link to VirusTotal. Every single antivirus engine comes back with a different definition of what the virus is.
Yeah.
That in itself should tell you they don't know what it is because they can't see the code.
Mhm.
There are people who can decompile the code using some very extreme measures. To
Mhm.
99.9% of the hackers out there, it's a secure program.
Yeah.
And antiviruses, they can't see past it. And that's where the problem comes from. They can't see what it does.
Mhm.
So that's why it starts getting flagged. The more it gets flagged, the more it gets reported.
Yes. Yeah, because I was talking to somebody about it today, and they were like, "Oh, let me install it." They're like, "Now it's flagged," because I remember when it was just flagged as untrusted software.
Yep.
He's like, "Yeah, now it flags as a Trojan." I was like, "What?" So,
Yeah, and that's what happened is the more people took and said no, the more it started to get flagged. It's there was some help along the way. I don't know where it came from. If you followed the LS Droid group last year, my web server people started attacking the web server,
yes,
and
I
they started
remember that.
hacking some of the unsecure files that I had. There
Mhm.
was nothing important in them. It was just basically ones and zeros that the LS Droid Android app was using for initial settings.
Mhm.
When they couldn't change things, they literally just started wiping files out.
Yes,
And
I do remember that happening.
once I took and I got rid of the secure files, and I made them secure, and then I just got rid of the web connection entirely with legacy. There's nothing left on the server for them to mess with. At that point in time, I started getting large amounts where my website itself was being reported for malicious software. to the point where my web host actually contacted me and said, "Hey, your site's been flagged. We're getting told by Google now that there's a problem with your site. We need to take and fix this." I'm like, "Okay, fix it. What's the problem?" My web host went over the site, scanned it. They said, "We need to fix some things." We fixed some things. They rescanned it. They said, "Hey, we're good." They resubmitted to Google. Google passed it. And then maybe 3 months later, right back to the same place it was the first time.
Yeah.
At which point in time, I had to get my web. I mean, getting a web host involved where you're talking to somebody on the phone these days is pretty hard, let alone getting somebody on the phone that actually knows the back end of their servers.
Hmm.
I spent, over the course of a couple weeks, I spent several hours on the phone with various engineers, let them go through every square inch of the server, scrub every single file on the server to the point where they were satisfied it was clean. That they got with Google, because I couldn't, I mean, Google won't listen to me. They got with Google, they got Google to rescan the site, and Google to this day is still giving it a clean bill of health. Everybody's done their due diligence at this point. However, the damage has been done. Antivirus companies don't care. Once it's been fixed, they still don't care. You pay for the software, you get a virus, you're going to blame it on that antivirus software.
Hmm.
They would rather take and not take the chance and just leave it as being flagged. ISPs are doing the same thing, to where they start blacklisting an ISP because it made it on somebody's list as being a potentially dangerous site, so let's just block it. And once those things happen, that's really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
And I mean, people who followed the project, they've seen this happen. They've seen it escalate over the last year or two where I've had it available. And I don't know who's involved with it, but as you can imagine, there are some people involved non-directly that stand to lose a lot from what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it is not in their interest that anything I produce is widely used.
Yes.
So you can kind of draw a connection where that might go.
And you actually see this a lot in kind of the any of the communities that make these kind of tools, of where the Russian versions of where they're reskinning the things and selling them, they want to attack the communities that do that stuff. So yeah, definitely there are actors out there that would want to do that. But let's segue into some of your other products that you do, because I know you make probably a dozen different things that work with Holly Terminators. And some of them have been sponsored by Holly directly, correct?
Actually, no. Holly has never sponsored anything I've done. I've
Okay.
only ever had a brief conversation with Holly where they basically told me that they don't give out any of the information I was asking for. And that was actually talking to one of, I guess it was an engineer in person at one of their Holly shows.
Mm-hmm.
Their representatives would have no clue about it. No, I have no direct contact or affiliation with Holly in anything that I've done.
Okay. So, but you do sell some of these products that you've made that do work with the Holly tools, correct?
Yes, the Holly is the most common thing that it works with. I build a couple of I call them conversion modules. They
Mm-hmm.
convert from one type of PCM to another vehicle's type.
Mm-hmm.
The primary one I do is for the BMW E46 chassis, to make your 3rd gen LS computers and your 4th gen LS computers talk with the BMW vehicle systems. And I've done the same thing for a few of the different Jeep chassis, the
Yeah.
Jeep Liberty and the TJ and stuff like that. The Holly was just another platform, but it was more popular than the other ones I've supported. I mean, I've done stuff for Haltech and AEM and stuff like that, but those are systems that you don't see mainstream like the Holly is.
Yeah,
And
I think that the Haltechs, I only ever hear of them on like Australian channels and stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's an expensive system, and the people that use them know why they're using them, and they generally don't. I mean, these aren't DIY guys using that stuff most of the time. Either they're professional tuners on their own vehicle, or they're guys who are going to go pay a professional tuner and don't ask questions. But the Holly was something that was a DIY project, and it was something I wanted to support, a computer that was popular, obviously for resale reasons, that it would be more beneficial to support something that has, everybody and their brother running it, as opposed to, one out of every 300 people even knows what it is. So that's why I started working on the Holly stuff. Unfortunately, I ran into a snag early on with a gas gauge, because the Hollys don't support a gas gauge, and making a gas gauge circuit work that is, I want to say universal, and what I feel is safe, in my opinion, turned out to be a lot more challenging than you expect. You're putting amperage to the sending unit, which in turn is voltage. You get a spark, bad things can happen there. If you overheat something, you burn something up, you're in the gas tank. So that's not something that I take lightly.
Yeah, I actually don't have one laying around anymore, because I sent it to the guy that's helping me make it. I'm working on, it converts the 99 to 02 GM harness into the 03 to 07, because the 03 to 07 is a much nicer instrument cluster, and everyone wants to put it, but you can't just swap a couple wires, plug it in, and make it work, because there's some different communication going on the bus there. And that was one that I spent a little while for the oil pressure sender. Like, I don't want to put too much current through. I just don't, I don't want to fry these sending units. Already burn up all the time. I don't want to burn them up even more than GM. So yeah,
that's actually really funny you say that. The 99 to 02 Silverados, if you go into the vehicle matrix platform in any tuning software and you enable the option for oil pressure sensor, then wire your oil pressure sensor for the 02 Corvette or any of the 03 Silverados. Oil pressure will then work on the 03 plus clusters.
Okay, but then you still run into the ABS, or not the airbag light won't work. That one needs you do need to wire that too. And there were a couple of others. There's a couple of signal commands you need to change too that we did in there. It's been a couple of months because the part shortage made it impossible for me to get a couple of the things that I'm using in it. So the project's been on the back burner for a couple of months. And the other guy that's working on it with me, he's in Minnesota and has been like snowed in, not going out to his truck.
Yeah, actually one of the early projects I did was I took, I think it was an 05 Silverado cluster, and I put it into a 98 Tahoe.
Okay.
Everything in the cluster worked.
Interesting. So yeah, I'll definitely have to look into some of the other ways of doing it that aren't directly with the circuit board there. But what you see is there's a guy, he's PI clusters, and what he does is he cuts the traces that go to those stepper motors, and then he puts these analog gauges in there and runs wires all the way out. It looks like shit. It's like the worst looking thing you'd ever see. And he charges $600 to do that.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, ooh. So there's a community behind wanting to do a little bit more to it. And then I've also got some of these things that I've worked on, whereas making my own gauge pods that'll, just a couple of connectors there and respond over CAN bus and stuff. And I remember seeing you were mentioning your project that you did where you were doing the conversion there. And I was very interested in how that project worked, because it was like, oh, I don't need to convert things, but I do need to know how to communicate with things.
Well, and it's conversion, I guess, is a loose term there. It was converting some analog inputs to the J1850 protocol, where like for like the headlights and stuff like that was needed to be done over the data bus on the 03 plus clusters, but I was still using a wired input from the 98 Tahoe that was being then converted to the J1850 protocol.
God, I do a bunch of these. So these clusters, the microcontrollers, when people work on them, they fail and have to replace the microcontrollers on them too. And one of the things that you're talking about, the GM LAN and there not being a need for it, is there's really no good tools out there for anybody to program that microcontroller. The only way that I teach people how to do it is to just JTAG into it and just rip it off through JTAG, instead of trying to go through the LAN without having to pay for an expensive tool for like hobbyists. You could pay for some expensive stuff and be able to program it, or just get the one you want and clone it through JTAG and then flash it onto the other way. So
yeah, like with the OBDX Pro GT, from the GT to the VX, which will also have the CAN bus on it, by leaving off the wireless protocols and possibly leaving off the one wire CAN protocol, we'll probably end up saving $40 to $50 off the price of the tool for the end user.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're looking at, we'll still have the one wire protocol on the GT.
Oh yeah,
But for your average user, if they're not going to benefit from it, they're paying for something that they don't need at that point.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, the GT. And what was the price point again on the GT? What it was?
I think we've got it set that we're gonna try and retail it at $129.99, despite the cost of parts these days.
That's super cheap for all that stuff that it supports
and
on there.
That's with the J2534 DIL files that are needed to work with SPS, stuff like that.
Yeah. So then there'll be that same kind of documentation for being able to communicate with it.
The documentation on the GT, I want to say right now, is 95 or 96 pages.
Sounds about right for a tool like that. And So just if you don't mind me asking, how exactly is manufacturing done on these? Do you own a pick and place machine? Are you doing these in your house,
We
or?
do own a pick and place machine, and we used it once. And we spent a lot of we bought it when the initial shortage became to where, forget about pricing, you're probably not even going to find the parts that you're looking for
Mhm.
unless you're looking from a million different places. So we bought a pick and place machine. I don't remember what we paid for it. It was some it wasn't one of your like Chinese versions of it. It was a kit basically. It's probably still a kit from China, but it was one that Jason's got the machine at his place and he had to put the thing together. I mean, he probably spent, I don't know, 75 or 100 hours putting this thing together. He had to
Oh yeah, they're
assemble
not simple.
all the framing, had to build the table for it, and got it all put together. Ran the thing one time and was like, this is the slowest thing on earth. Like, there's no way that we can take and deal with this. And at the time, we were still dealing with individual boards. So you could build one board, and I want to say it was like 20 or 30 minutes that the machine ran to build one board. And then
Okay.
you had to take and solder the one board in the reflow oven.
Mhm.
And you get anything happens that, a part gets jammed, we
Yep.
had to start the whole board over again. And
Okay.
it's like, we're just going to start paying more for this stuff because this is not worth it.
Yeah.
So we do have a pick and place machine. We determined that for prototypes it works fine for doing one-offs with.
Mhm.
For actually producing tools, it has never been a viable option for us because of the space that it takes, the cost to buy parts and reels, and the likelihood it's going to fail when you're making multiples of the same thing. So we have a manufacturer. We started out originally using, it's a JLC. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started out using them and we were happy with them until they started expanding. And then we started experiencing manufacturing defects. These are the type of things that will never make it back to the end user. But part of that's because we take every tool and they only come partially finished. We still have to finish them by hand. And
Yeah.
then we program every tool by hand and we test every tool by hand. So anything that was wrong with the board, we're going to find out very early in the process. And we got to the point where technically we had a run of boards done that was it was I think it was 10 panels of, multiples per panel.
Yeah.
They put parts on the boards backwards.
Okay.
They're using lead-free solder, which requires a lot more heat to unsolder, and they're
Mhm.
gluing the parts on. Jason spent weeks unsoldering the parts. We then have to buy the parts to replace them to then resolder them on the boards. That was
Okay.
kind of the point where we're going to draw the line. We're out. I mean, the company was out. I mean, neither one of us out personal money. The company was out hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just in defects from what we experienced through that. And it's like, we can't keep doing it like this.
Yeah.
And we then decided there's a really big misconception that, oh, you go get a manufactured in China, it's going to be a lot cheaper.
Mhm.
We have a build house in China that Jason used them for a number of years before we did the stuff for OBDX Pro, but he's used them for a number of years. They cost us quite a bit more than what they cost through JLC.
Mhm.
The difference is we experience less than a 1% defect rate.
Yes. So that's
When
a
we quit using JLC, we were over 30%.
Yeah. So that's a big thing with Chinese manufacturing that people don't understand is you pay for quality control. That's what you need to pay for over there. And when you get good quality control, you keep paying them for it because that's never any manufacturer has errors. Like everyone, no matter how good they are, you have
Oh
errors.
yeah.
It's the quality control guys that catch that error and stop it from going out the door. And JLC PCB actually sponsors this
Oh,
channel.
I'm just calling them like I see them. If they got a problem, they can look up my account. I've got plenty of complaints filed with them.
Yeah, that's fine. I had to throw it out there. I thought it was
Oh,
funny because they're the main sponsor of the channel.
oh yeah. The, I've probably had a dispute open with them probably since October, November of last year. There hasn't been a week when I didn't have a dispute open.
Okay, so that's good to know because they've been pressuring me to talk about their assembly service, and I've never used their assembly service. I've only used their PCB manufacturing
The
service.
PCBs, I think I've only ever had one problem with their PCBs,
Yeah.
and that might have even been my problem. I've learned a lot of stuff as I've been working with them. We're up into 4 and 6 layer boards now.
Mhm.
So, I mean, those, you're dealing with some expensive boards. We
Yes.
found out they have some options that you can check there's no way those options actually make a difference.
Yeah.
They're I think they call it their 4-wire Kelvin service that like adds double the price or more to every board.
Hmm.
We've had bad boards with that service check. So
Yeah.
it's like, what is this actually doing? Small production runs for like, well, I'm sorry, small prototype runs, we never really had problems with up until the last probably 6 or 9 months.
Hmm.
For any, I mean, larger orders, they go to a different building. They're up to now 5 or 6 different warehouses.
Yes.
They've
Yes.
become a huge facility.
Hmm.
And with the huge facility, obviously your defect rate is going to increase. You can't always be perfect. And their original manufacturing rate was virtually 100%, which was unheard of for their
Yes.
prices. So yeah, I mean, PCBs, their PCBs are still good, and we still use them for a lot of stuff, and we'll still use them for prototyping. But we just can't risk, when we're using processors that I think we were at one point we were 27, $28 for just the processor on the board.
Yeah.
We get 250 boards made, and there's defects in the boards. We can't just throw those out. That's a lot. You're talking thousands of dollars now. So
So,
yeah, that's a big deal.
I forgot the company that they have,
LCSC.
LCSC. Have you seen how expensive the Arduino processors have been on there? The Atmega 328
The
AU.
$60 price or the high point of 120? Because I've seen
Yes,
them
the
up to 100.
$120.
Yeah, I've seen them at 120,
Yes.
and I know people that were paying that.
Oh my God, I don't know why anyone would pay that. I mean, you need it, but I don't know.
For a person who doesn't design their circuit board, changing from an Arduino processor to an ARM processor is, I mean, that is, you might as well start over and rewrite your entire project from scratch.
Mhm.
The architecture is completely different. Yes, there are ways you can cross a lot of things over.
Mhm.
Through the Arduino environment, for example, you can use them on both processors.
Yeah.
If you do anything more than use like a basic if statement or checking mills and stuff like that, you go into the interrupt routines or hardware timers, none of it interchanges. So yeah, you got to build your new hardware and rewrite your program. They just pay more just to keep using the same processor.
Yeah, with like the STM32s, I was liking what is embed. I was liking embed for a while, but then it's gotten worse and worse and worse over time.
They don't support the newer processors either.
Yeah, and they're not supporting the newer ones. So I keep opening Cube IDE and going, I'm gonna sit down and learn this, and I don't. I keep opening it up and like, okay, I made an LED blink, and then I stop, and that's like as far as I get with Cube.
There are people who Cube is very well suited for. Jason, for example, is more than capable of writing in Cube. However, he chooses not to, simply because there's a lot of redundant things they do that don't need to be done, that just make it more complicated than it needs to be.
That's how I felt about a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the tools that we're working on right now with the GT. Jason actually wrote the low level language code using the HAL LL libraries for the STM32 G4 series.
Okay.
Because there are no good CAN bus examples. So he took their raw library basically from STM and adapted it to work with in Visual Studio with the program environment we've got. And I mean, this is some pretty complex coding that he did, and it's still easier than using Cube.
Yeah.
And it's because there's none of the extra overhead. And probably the best example of how much Cube can complicate things, we have to program. There's a lot of people are obsessed with, like, they call them RTOSs. It's a real-time operating system.
Yeah.
And they're great for a lot of things. It physically cannot do J1850 VPW. Okay. The real-time operating system cannot toggle the pins fast enough to read and write the frames.
Okay. Because
of all the overhead that comes with it. So we have to use what's called raw, to where we're writing just in a basic loop, kind of like what Arduino does, but it's the raw. We're not talking machine level. We're still using a C++ based language, but we're having to take and we're having to toggle the pins ourselves manually. We're just using the HAL libraries though, because it's still easier than dealing with Cube.
Yeah, Cube really is a nightmare. Yeah, it's a nightmare. I've been trying to learn it and I just can't. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what environment are you working in?
You could categorize it as Arduino, because it's an Arduino derivative from the STM32 Arduino project.
Okay.
However, there's virtually nothing left of the original core. We're using all the HAL libraries directly from Cube. We
Okay.
use Cube to take and generate um, our int files and our void C functions for
Mhm.
clock routines and initializing serial and stuff like that. We're using the HAL libraries directly out of the STM32. So I mean, it's based off the STM Arduino core, looking to see what they did, and then we kind of go in and do the same thing, but using the actual Cube libraries.
Okay.
So it's very similar to Arduino. What I actually do a lot of my own stuff in Arduino, but I'm using
Mhm.
a modified version of the STM Arduino core.
Okay.
But yeah, I actually did get started in Arduino.
Yeah, and that's one thing so people get like imposter syndrome when you start talking about Arduino. They go, "Oh, I'm not a real programmer because I do stuff in Arduino," and that's not true. You can do really powerful things in the Arduino platform. So I
Oh,
think that
that's exactly it. And this is something I hated early on. The Arduino platform has probably the worst debugger that you will ever see when it comes to a compiler error, because it tells you virtually nothing.
yes, it does tell you virtually nothing.
If you
Yes.
figure out how to work the Adreno compiler errors to actually find and fix your errors, by the time you move on to a real programming IDE like in Visual Studio or something, you will have mastered the compiler errors in any type you can think of,
Yes.
because you'll have learned to look for the abstracts that, oh, I missed a semicolon on page 3, or something dumb like that, or
Yeah.
I missed a bracket in my setup.
Yeah.
Yeah, you learn to find those. It ends up becoming a lot easier once you move to a real programming IDE.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd agree there. I really wish Embed would have got their stuff together though.
I used Embed a couple of years ago, and I was using Adreno. I moved to Embed. I looked at Cube. I looked at I think it's Keel or Cal or something like that.
Yeah. Kel.
And
Yeah.
yep, I looked at that. And I looked at Embed, and I liked Embed. The Embed online compiler was great. I don't know if you ever used that or not. I think they're closing it down now.
Yeah, I strictly used the Studio Embed Studio, but I some of the programs wouldn't compile in Studio. You had to use the online compiler. So I'd used the online compiler a couple of times, but only for like
I would use them both to go between them, but the online compiler was nice, especially because you could find examples from their database. You could just load into the online compiler, generate it. Hey, does it work? And at the time I was using Adreno, so I'm like, originally the STM Arduino core, I'm not sure how far back you follow the processors.
Mhm.
STM32 only started making the Adreno framework, and it was like, I want to say end of 2018 or 2019. Before that, a guy named Roger Clark was the one who was developing for
Yep.
them. And Roger's core was, it was his interpretation of how the framework should have worked. And there's
Mhm.
a lot of things he did that I'm going to say he still did better than what STM did.
Yeah.
His programs were smaller, they were more logical, but there were also some inherent defects that he couldn't overcome the problems with, that STM, when they stepped in and started doing it, they actually they fixed things. It's funny we bring that up. You remember the old STM Arduino forums when Roger
Yes.
Clark was hosting them?
Yes.
I've been hosting those since he shut it down.
I didn't know
It's
that.
the STM Arduino forum. They're linked on the current ones. It's a site as an archive. I use the Wayback Machine to recover Roger's site when he shut the thing down before he lost the information, because I was like in dire need of it at the time.
Okay.
I got it, recovered it, put it into an online database or online website there, and I'm like, there's no point in me keeping this to myself, so I made it public.
Mhm.
And there's links now embedded all over the web for people using it. There's a lot of good information there, and people are still using his core, even though there's better options, but his core still works for a lot of people. I mean, if you're going to get into an STM processor, his core is the way to go,
Yeah.
because it's as close to the Adreno framework as you can get.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to keep you up all night, so I think we'll
I'll
probably
be up
wrap.
till probably 7 or 8.
Well, let me double check the list. I think we've really covered everything. We did not cover what your background is, so let's get that, and then we will end this. What is your background in electronics? What is your kind of suggestion for other people that want to kind of follow in your footsteps, other than creeping on your username online?
Well, I don't have a formal background in electronics per se. When I was many years younger, and I originally went to my first tech school, I was still in high school, and I walked through and I looked at the different programs. I looked at computer science, I looked at their IT department for hardware and their automotive department. And I listened to the lies, and I went with the automotive department because they were talking really big numbers with lots of money that you could make and such a glamorous job. And it was nothing but horrible lies, and that I I'm still regretting today. But I ended up went into automotive, and I was ASE master technician for it was almost 25 years that I did it for,
Mhm.
and it took a serious toll on every single part of my body.
Yes.
I worked a lot of hours for a lot of years doing in a lot of positions that I shouldn't have, on a lot of harsh conditions, and I finally just got to the point where I'm like, I knew my career in the automotive industry was coming to an end when I started having some medical conditions come up that was going to be an end of career type of situation. So I started looking for alternatives. I went back to college. I got a degree in automotive science to actually teach automotive, only to
Mhm.
find out that they don't care about people that teach that actually know what they're doing. They just want people that agree that says they know how to teach that don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. And I did a short run of that and decided that that definitely wasn't what I wanted to do. And I'd always liked electronics, so I started looking into them a little bit more. And the more I looked into them, the more they intrigued me, and started working on that. It was actually, it would have been last January is actually when I took and I left my job as an automotive mechanic, and I started working for myself full time. It is by no means glamorous, and I work more hours than anyone you can ever imagine. And I've got a million different projects going that are always in a perpetual state of never being finished, but always almost, they're on the verge of it. Uh, but it's something I enjoy doing. I don't mind sitting down and working on something for, 24 to 30 hours without getting up. I mean, go to the bathroom, but you work on it straight, because you start working on a problem, you work on it till you're done. You don't have to worry about, going to work the next day, or, getting up and going to bed because you're getting tired. You want to go take a nap, come back, go back to what you're doing.
Yep.
And it's let me get a lot farther with my projects than what I ever would have while I was still working. And that's the entire reason why I did it. That's also when OBDX Pros really started flourishing, because I could then devote not just attention to my own projects, but when OBDX Pro needs something. Over the last couple of years, we've had to rebuild the hardware designs numerous times because a voltage regulator is no longer available, or we've got to change the part number for a crystal and it's a different package and we got to redo the board. I just actually got done rebuilding the hardware for our OBDX Pro GT because JLC changed their assembly requirements for their boards recently,
Mhm.
and the old design they weren't happy with. Even though the
Mhm.
design was about 3 months old, they wanted the whole thing rebuilt. And I mean, I'm rebuilding a board with, it's 75 or 78 parts on it, and a couple thousand feet worth of traces. So that's a lot of time to rebuild. But yeah, sat down, rebuilt the thing in like 3 days.
What
So
what are you
that it
doing it in? Are you in Altium or KiCad or
easy EDA.
Easy EDA? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I
I've
it started out easy, and I've learned to master it.
Yeah. Just if you ever become a student again, you can get Altium for free while you're a student. So I've been learning Altium and using it lately because I am a student in college right now. But I'm similar where I don't really have a background in electronics. I was looking at things to do after I graduated high school and had my first kid and was like, I need quick money. And I walked into a recruiter's office and I joined the Air Force because they
Oh,
talked big money, and I did security forces. It took a toll on my body, and I got med boarded out of the military and had to find something else to do. And so it's kind of similar, similar but different path. Okay.
hey, at least you probably got something when you left. All I got is you can't keep up with it with the younger kids now. So we're gonna start sticking you with the hard problems that don't pay anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I did end up with something a little nice coming out, so I can't complain about my service at all. There's no complaint there. I really enjoyed my time in the military, but it was more of just a frustration of them kicking me out. It's like, but I don't want to get out now. Um,
Yeah, and that's the part that would really suck about that is, if you enjoy doing what you're doing, if something happens that's not your fault, but they have no place for you now.
yeah.
I
There's
mean,
just
even if they sit you down behind a desk, where you're still involved, no, they can't have that.
yeah. And so when I got out, I used my GI Bill, and I've been in college since taking technician classes. And we were touring this facility, and they manufacture these power supplies for airplanes and military things and stuff like that. And touring, and then I was talking to their lead technician and was like, "Hey, yeah, I got this YouTube channel." He checked it out and he said, "Hey, come work for us." And that's how I started working there.
Oh,
Well, I think he checked out the channel. I don't know, either that or the professor talked me up, one of the two.
oh,
And I mean, oh, my projects have all come to a stop now that I'm working pretty much. It's like impossible to do any of my like personal projects that I want to do, but I'm learning a lot there, so I like it there.
Most of my projects started when my daughter took and she ended up getting married and moving out. Well,
Mhm.
she moved out slightly before she got married, but once she left home and it was then just me and my wife, we both had a lot more time to do things, and that's where that was really where I started having, where I could put time into focusing on something that I was doing. And my LS Droid is that's kind of where that started from. Is that come home and I want to relax after a day of work, so I'd sit down and I work on a little bit each night, and I've got probably multiple thousands of hours into the Android version, and probably I'm probably 1,800 hours into the Windows version at this point.
Mhm.
But it was something, I didn't want to make it feel like a job. It wanted to, it was something I was doing for enjoyment. And if I wanted to get up and walk away from what I was doing, I could get up and walk away from what I was doing. And that's what really mattered to me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good note to stop this interview, but I'm sure the community is going to have a ton of questions. We may have to do this again sometime,
Okay.
just to fill in some questions. But I really I enjoyed having you on here, and I hope you enjoyed being on here. Okay, well, thanks for sticking around and enjoying the interview. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. But if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.